I'm Scott Price, and I'm an actor with Back Theatre from Geelong. This is the first in a series of interviews which I'm about to be doing about provocation in art and society. I'm about to be interviewing artists, political figures, and activists. I'm here today live with Vallejo Gantner, and he is a artistic director from Performing Space 122 in New York, and was actually born here in Melbourne, Australia, and he joins me right now. Vallejo Gantner, thanks for your time. Please tell me about your latest show.
Well, we just had two shows here in Melbourne. We had a show from an amazing New York performer, dancer, actress, singer, writer called Okwi Okpokwasili, that was about kind of the sexual awakening of young women and about race and racial politics and race and sex, and it was pretty intense, and that was at the North Melbourne Town Hall, and then that closed and we opened another show at the North Melbourne Town Hall, and both of these were part of the Melbourne Festival, and that was by a guy called Andrew Schneider, who's a kind of interactive technology whiz, and he kind of made a show that was about the theory of relativity and quantum physics and about the brain and how we don't really see things, or how we fool ourselves into seeing things, and you know the glitches are kind of part of how we see time, and that time doesn't always move forward. Sometimes it sort of seems to be moving sideways. And he wasn't just talking about it, he was enacting it and kind of living it. And so we ended up living it.
Yeah. Tell me about your parties.
So we're sitting on a roof of Curtin House. I don't know if you've already done that, and I used to live in this building. In fact, my living room was directly beneath where we were sitting, and it was about the size of a tennis court. And then we had another one the same size just below it. And it was before lots of people were living in the city. Yeah. So it felt pretty special to be living in the city, and the Gin Palace had just opened a couple of blocks over. So there was suddenly all these bars opening up in the laneways. And we took full advantage of living in a pretty massive apartment in the city. The last count we did, apparently we had about 600 people housewarming that went until 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. So we had some big parties up here. Yeah.
What sort of arts shocks you?
I'm thinking about it. I don't. Sometimes the really little generous things are the things that are the most shocking in art. I don't need to see someone peeing on stage or naked or nudity or any of that.
Or full frontal nudity.
Full frontal nudity doesn't shock me anymore. I've sort of seen a lot of that over the years. So the thing that shocks you sometimes is the intimacy moment. Yeah. That the moment where it's not someone pretending to try and connect with you somehow, but there's actually some kind of genuine. Sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's truth, sometimes it's love. I don't know. It could be any number of things, but it's an intimate little moment, and that's almost the most shocking thing.
Do you think it's important for art to be shocking or outrageous?
No, I don't. I think it's important for art to be provocative. I don't think it's important for it to be shocking or outrageous, because at a certain point, that's just like turning the volume up all the time. You know, you're just turning everything up to 11, and it just makes everybody go deaf.
What sort of shows have you done in the past that are provocative?
There was one. Oh, there are lots. There are lots. And what's provocative in one place is completely boring in another place. So that's a hard question to answer. It's a good question, but it's really fucking hard to answer. I'm thinking of one by an artist called Young Jean Lee that she's come to New York, and she writes these plays that are where she kind of could run a really conventional sort of story or about racial politics or about feminism or about religion. I'm thinking the religion one almost more than anything. And what I took from this production that we did was that she wanted us to believe in God. And in the Lower East Side in New York, that's a pretty bloody provocative thing to say.
Of course, yeah.
Then we did a show by an American who lives in Brussels called Davis Freeman, and that was pretty amazing. He did a show where it was there were 7 or 8 in the audience, and then there were 7 or 8 rooms, and in each room, you went in and you got a stack of cards that were each a colour. So you had yellow cards, I had blue ones, and I'd go from the centre room and I'd put a card through a curtain, and the light above the door would change, and you'd walk into this room, and in the room was one person, sometimes 2. In one case it was like 5 people, and they were all wearing masks of your face with a photograph of your face. So the kind of everything about reality just got sort of turned on its head. You're watching a couple kiss on a couch and they're both you. Someone's sort of sexy lap dancing and it's you, but you're doing it to yourself. You kind of wanted to throw up.
Which is really quite bizarre, yeah.
Yeah, it was very bizarre. Very disorienting and very kind of confronting.
So obviously, in what context does the audience get shocked? Is that correct? Yeah.
I understand what you mean. So in New York, we've got this history of people taking their clothes off on stage, and there's been performance art where people were cutting themselves or, naked or pissing on stage or dipping themselves in fluids, and you sort of feel like that's not going to shock anybody anymore. That sort of audience has seen it, and that statement's been made about what you can do with your body and all the different crazy or scary or gross or whatever things you can do with your body. People like Stellark hanging themselves from hooks, or and so that's not shocking. That's where I'm kind of coming from now, where it's sort of about the moment of intimacy. But it's a really hard thing to find because at the same time we're on stage. So the idea that you're not performing, that somehow it's true, that's not necessarily real either. So, more and more we're finding in Europe and in America, there's sort of this thing of using non-performers, because somehow that's going to make it more real and truer and more intimate somehow. So that becomes the sort of shocking thing. I don't know. When I was living in Ireland, there wasn't that sort of history of that kind of work. There were a couple of people doing it, and they were shocking audiences in a really big way. I remember we brought over a dance piece from Brazil that had 12 performers, and they were all naked the entire performance, and they were rolling over the audience, and they were kind of doing these sort of body sculptures in incredibly explicit and weird positions. And that was pretty intense for the audience there. They'd never seen anything like it. It was very popular as well.
So obviously you're talking about intimacy. So what sort of shows has it had like intimate moments like?
Well, I think Oakwee show that I was talking about earlier, that was just in the festival, felt, and I don't know how much of it is really autobiographical, but it felt very intimate in the way that she brought us into that story. I think one of the things for me that characterizes work that is intimate is that it lets you as an audience member create the meaning of it It doesn't tell you what it means. For me, when a piece of theatre or dance or whatever is kind of there saying, this is the wall, or this is what I mean, and it's like they're sort of, performer is standing on a stage almost like a sign, but that becomes a kind of defensive sort of show. And actually, the critical criteria of something that is truly sort of intimate is that it lets you, as the audience, make the work.
So it lets you decide what outcome the performance will be.
I mean, you can have work that is incredibly controlling of what the experience is going to be. Like every person is going to have a light hit them in this way, or they're going to take this long to walk through a corridor. But it's when you're being told what it means that it loses the intimacy. So yeah, determine the outcome, determine the meaning more than anything.
Yeah. Can provocative word be interesting at the time, or is it provocative at the time?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think you're asking me all the curly ones, and I don't actually know the answer. I've never thought about time as like a measure of provocation. I mean, of course, something that was provocative, wearing a two-piece swimsuit was provocative in, 1910. Yeah, so that what different people think is provocative, it changes over time. But I think some ideas remain really radical. I think, and there's time and there's place. Like they move and they, like in America, things are getting more conservative at the moment, whereas you'd think they would have just been going the other way. But then we're also completely immune to certain things that, about gay marriage or whatever. It's becoming non-provocative. So the things change, but they don't always sort of change in a single direction.
So what's your view on gay marriage at the moment? Like, do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing?
It's a good thing. I think it's great. I mean, I don't understand why I can't see any reason why you would want to stop it. It just doesn't sort of compute for me. Yeah.
So why do you think artists are interested in shocking work?
I don't think all artists are interested in shocking work or even in provocative work. I think a lot of artists make pretty boring work. I think it's about, because to try and figure out how to, poke people in different ways and in interesting ways, part of that is inherently provocative. I think being provocative allows you to say new things in different ways and allows you to kind of create new ways of seeing, and that is provocative. That advances the conversation. So how could they not be interested in it?
So what sort of new things are you looking for in provocative art? Like,
I'm looking for new ways of not being boring about politics in art. I'm looking for new ways that I think a work or an artist is going to create the experience that I have as an audience member. I'm looking for new ways of thinking about what our body might be doing, or how different kind of media might relate to each other. Trying to think about new ways to sort of wake you up, and you don't always know what that's going to be. Sometimes it doesn't have to be bells and whistles. It doesn't have to be dropping your pants on stage. It doesn't have to be cutting yourself. It doesn't have to be big video projection. It can be something that's incredibly simple and incredibly quiet and incredibly low tech.
So, why do you think audiences are interested in provocative art?
Because I think they're looking to get woken up as well. We're if we want to watch, there's plenty of television soap operas. You can just go and have like pop comfort food. You can go to Broadway musicals or boring plays, which just look like photocopies of all of our everyday life, or a sort of hyper version of it. And we don't need that. I mean, I think people who are interested in kind of exploring new ideas are looking for work that is provocative because they want to have their brain messed with a little bit, and they want to feel awake. They want to feel alive.
So, do you have any questions for me?
What's the most provocative thing you've ever made as an artist?
Oh, let's see. Ganesh versus Third Reich.
That was pretty provocative.
Yep.
I found that pretty... Actually, I should have put... you know what? I would have put small metal objects and Ganesh as two of the more provocative things I've seen. I found Ganesh pretty hard to watch.
Yeah, I got
What's the most provocative thing you'd like to make?
I'm not sure. I'll have to think about that.
All right.
For Gante or Ganta, thanks for your time, and yeah, thank you.
That was a total pleasure. Thank you.
I'm Scott Price. Please like, subscribe, follow, and hopefully I'll see you guys in another episode. Thank you.